This is Hannah Dugan, a Wisconsin Circuit Court judge for Milwaukee County. On April 25th, Judge Dugan was arrested in the parking lot of the Milwaukee County Courthouse. She was charged with obstruction and concealing an individual to prevent his discovery and arrest. Let's take a look at how we got here. On April 18th, an ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations arrest team was at the courthouse to take into custody Eduardo Flores Ruiz, a twice-deported native and citizen of Mexico who was to appear in a hearing in Dugan's courtroom. Flores Ruiz had been charged with 3 counts of battery, domestic abuse, infliction of physical pain or injury. According to the complaint, Flores Ruiz's defense counsel photographed members of the arrest team in the hallway of the courthouse. She then entered the courtroom and approached Judge Dugan's clerk. When the clerk alerted Judge Dugan of the arrest team's presence, Judge Dugan became visibly angry, commented that the situation was absurd, left the bench, and entered chambers, i.e. her office. Judge Dugan, along with another judge, then approached members of the arrest team in the public hallway. Witnesses uniformly reported that Judge Dugan was visibly upset and had a confrontational, angry demeanor. Judge Dugan then argued with a deportation officer, an FBI agent, and a CBP officer, and demanded that they report to the Chief Judge's office. So while members of the arrest team were in the Chief Judge's office, Judge Dugan went back to her courtroom. A courtroom deputy who was in the hallway recalled that upon his return to the courtroom, the defense counsel for Flores Ruiz was talking to the court clerk. Defense counsel and Flores Ruiz then walked toward each other and toward the public courtroom exit. The courtroom deputy then saw Judge Dugan get up and heard Judge Dugan say something like, "Wait, come with me." Despite having been advised of the administrative warrant for the arrest of Flores Ruiz, Judge Dugan then escorted Flores Ruiz and his counsel out of the courtroom through the jury door, which leads to a non-public area of the courthouse. This is unusual, as only deputies, juries, court staff, and in-custody defendants being escorted by deputies use the back jury door. Defense attorneys and defendants who are not in custody never used the jury door. Soon after, a DEA agent who was part of the arrest team observed Flores Ruiz in the hallway and noted that Flores Ruiz was looking around, and he saw he and his attorney walk briskly towards an elevator bank furthest from the courtroom, presumably to avoid the arrest team members who were in the Chief Judge's office. They observed Flores Ruiz and his attorney walk briskly towards the elevator bank on the south end of the 6th floor onto the elevator. One of the DEA agents got on with them. Flores Ruiz and his attorney spoke to each other in Spanish, which the DEA agent did not understand. They exited the elevator on the bottom floors of the courthouse and used the 9th Street public exit to leave the building. Outside in the front of the courthouse, an FBI agent and DEA agent approached Flores Ruiz and identified themselves as law enforcement. Flores Ruiz turned around and sprinted down the street. A foot chase ensued. The agents pursued Flores Ruiz for the entire length of the courthouse and ultimately apprehended him near the intersection of West State Street and 10th Street. Flores Ruiz was then handcuffed and detained. Now you might be asking yourself, why didn't the agents arrest Flores Ruiz when they saw him initially leave the courtroom? Well, at that moment, he had not had his hearing yet, and the ICE ERO team agreed that the arrest would take place after Flores Ruiz's court appearance. And as it turns out, the judge secretly adjourned the case against Flores Ruiz. Later that morning, an assistant district attorney who was in the courtroom realized that Flores Ruiz's case had never been called and asked the court about it. The ADA learned that Flores Ruiz's case had been adjourned. This happened without the ADA's knowledge or participation, even though they were present in court to handle Flores Ruiz's case on behalf of the state, and even though his victims were present in the courtroom.
That prosecutor had this case on his docket. He had the victims there in the audience. For the victims, and I'm a big victim advocate, this was a big deal. And the thing that really bothers me about the judge, and I think this is a big mess, is that she adjourned the case without telling the prosecutor and without telling the victims. and whether there's probable cause or beyond a reasonable doubt could convict her, that to me shows that she was willfully trying to hide that defendant from being arrested.
So basically, Judge Dugan, without telling anyone, surreptitiously adjourned the case and led Flores Ruiz out the back door of the courtroom. This was presumably to throw off the ICE agents, because again, the arrest team agreed not to make an arrest until after the hearing. Judge Dugan allowed this to happen while she thought that everyone in the arrest team was held up inside the chief judge's office. Furthermore, they would be expecting him to leave the courtroom through the public courtroom exit and not through the back door. And consider how quickly this all went down. Flores Ruiz first arrived on the 6th floor of the courthouse at approximately 8:43 a.m. By 8:50 a.m., Flores Ruiz and his attorney were out of the courtroom and on the elevator. With that said, the agents didn't move to make an arrest until it was obvious that Flores Ruiz was exiting the building with the intent of not coming back, which was made even clearer when Flores Ruiz ran away from them. So Judge Dugan was charged with obstructing or impeding a proceeding before a department or agency of the United States, and was also charged with concealing an individual to prevent his discovery and arrest. Now, you would think that when reporting this story, that the main focus would have been about a judge allegedly violating federal law, but the media had a script to stick to.
The Trump administration signaling a major escalation in its deportation efforts.
Critics are saying it's a major escalation in the Trump administration's effort to pressure officials to assist in deportation efforts.
The Trump administration's clashes with the courts reached a whole new level today with the arrest of a judge.
President Trump's immigration crackdown escalated today.
Today, an escalation in the Trump administration's battle with the judiciary and local authorities.
A dramatic escalation in the Trump administration's deportation efforts.
And a new major escalation in President Trump's immigration crackdown.
New escalation in its immigration crackdown.
But the Trump administration sparring with the judiciary branch escalated yesterday.
So this is clearly an escalation.
A dramatic escalation.
It's dramatic escalation.
It's a major escalation.
A major escalation. This feels like an insane and reckless escalation from the Trump administration arresting a judge.
They just cannot help themselves. Orange man bad. But believe it or not, there was some objectivity to be found.
Looking at the complaint, let's strip the politics out of it. This is a crime. If they can prove what happened here, it is a crime.
This indictment is strong on its face. They have numerous witnesses. They have a lot of facts that will support this prosecution.
The affidavit supporting the judge's arrest, it's very thorough. It does raise legitimate questions about her conduct and whether she intentionally snuck a defendant out, knowing he was about to be arrested by ICE in the hallway.
This judge, let's strip the Trump of it all out. Let's strip the immigration of it all out. Let's say law enforcement shows up at a building with an arrest warrant. They're looking for person A. Person B then says, hey, there's a secret escape door out back. I'm going to show you the way, and then ushers that person out the back door. That is textbook obstruction.
In this case, you had a man charged with domestic violence, previously had been deported. He was clearly deportable. And so, it's not really clear what the interest was from shielding him from that.
And I think most people would also hear this and think, wait a second, the judge opened a back door to let this guy leave and escape law enforcement, and then he took off on foot? That seems to be a really bad idea.
Absolutely, it makes it worse that she was harboring someone who, with all of these horrible things in his background, but
who was in this country illegally.
Who's in this country unlawfully in the first place.
It does assert that the agents were trying to follow policy and do it in the hallway or the lobby once they've had somebody go through security, they know he's not armed.
The problem with what the judge did here was she put herself in the middle of that situation where she had no jurisdiction or authority to do so. It was a federal matter. She is a state court judge, and to play games like that put her in a risky position.
So many of these legal experts were like, well, if the criminal complaint is accurate, then she's completely screwed. But
if the facts are true, as alleged by the FBI agent in the court papers today, it doesn't look great for the judge, no matter how you slice it. But then the other question is, was this kind of escalatory action, was this the best course of action, to actually go and arrest her and take her to court and charge her federally? That's a big step.
Now, what I would take some issue with is, why are they, for a sitting judge, putting her in a holding cell? Why are they arresting her at her workplace and so on, if not to make a big splashy political statement about it? Under normal circumstances, they could have called her at home, called her attorney, or whatever else. They intended to make this far more of a political point than a legal one.
I also think arresting her, with law enforcement in the morning, I don't know, I assume it was at her house, talk about heavy-handed. I mean, you could have sent charging documents, served her with charging documents. This woman's going to show up in court. So this was about intimidation.
Is not whether the FBI or the DOJ is going to prove a case against her. She could very well be exonerated. It's the performative nature of everything that led up to that.
There seems to be less concern about the judge ignoring the supremacy clause of the Constitution and more concern about how the DOJ is handling the matter.
Yeah, this is a messaging day. And the message here is treating this judge like she just committed some sort of a violent crime, which she didn't, and publicly humiliating her. That is the message to the rest of local judges, local sheriffs, local officials who may feel uncomfortable now being on the pointy edge of the government's immigration efforts.
Much of what this is about, which became almost immediately clear, is making an example out of her for other judges around the country, and not just on the narrow question of immigrants in courtrooms.
Don't you try to get in the way of our efforts when getting in the way is perilously close to not doing everything you can to hand someone over, and that is not the law.
This is really just an attack on the judicial system.
And her arrest of Judge Dugan was a signal to the judiciary.
It's about intimidation. It's a scare tactic.
Intimidation or attempts at intimidation of the judiciary.
The main purpose here, of course, is to intimidate the judiciary.
A sense of bullying, if you will, to try and get judges now to bend the knee.
In other words, they're afraid that Trump is going to put judges on notice and dissuade them from violating federal law. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Now, the worst takes regarding this whole incident was that when Judge Dugan attempted to help an alleged criminal escape federal authorities, that she was somehow standing up for civil rights.
It may be possible this is like a civil rights infraction, and this judge saw this as a way for her to stand up against what she thinks is unfair use of the government power against immigrants. We saw this also in the 1960s and 50s when people were sitting down at lunch counters, or kids were standing outside. They were being hosed down with fire hoses. Yeah, were they breaking the law? Perhaps. Was the law also wrong in the way they went after them? Absolutely.
This all happened on Good Friday, and I would say, as John Lewis, the late John Lewis would say, I'm glad that she got in good trouble on Good Friday.
I don't yet know the specific details of this case, whether she escorted the guy out the jury door or whether she's let him, so that's all murky. I don't want to comment on this specific case.
Oh, well, that's smart, David. You wouldn't want to look like an idiot or anything.
But especially on the issue of immigration, there are a lot of people who are appalled by what the administration is doing. And there will be times for civil disobedience. And to me, let's say she did escort this guy out the door. If federal enforcement agencies come to your courtroom and you help a guy escape, that is two things. One, it strikes me as maybe something illegal, but it also strikes me as something heroic.
So when Judge Dugan decided that she was going to go out of her way to help a twice deported domestic abuser, she was being a hero. Got it.
And in times of trouble, then people are sometimes called to do civil disobedience. And so you can both think that she shouldn't have legally done this, and that morally protecting somebody against, frankly, a predatory enforcement agency.
Ever since Trump took office, Democrats have been screaming about everything that Trump does. It's a constitutional crisis. But when judges start violating federal law, it's justified civil disobedience. It's good trouble.
Sometimes civil disobedience is necessary. And I don't know if we'll get to this point, but we could get to this point in weeks or months where acts of civil disobedience on a lot of fronts may be necessary.
So not only is David Brooks trying to justify more of this civil disobedience, but he's calling for more of it.
You have a judge who is, it seems to me, taking a moral stand. I look forward to hearing from that judge, because if she doesn't stand up against what's now happened to her, which is a ratcheting up of the intimidation against the judiciary, then no other judge is going to take that same stand, and that is my big fear.
You heard that, right? Jonathan Capehart is fearful that judges might actually be intimidated and choose not to fight back against federal immigration law, i.e. the law of the land. Frickin' clown world. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks to Poofy for looking at the script. And as always, thanks for tuning in. And I'll see you next time. If there is next time.